Hey everybody, I'm Tarl Yarber with Fixated Real Estate. I'm with my best friend in the whole wide world, Mr. J Scott with BiggerPockets. And today we want to talk to you guys about the 5 steps to getting your first wholesale deal. Now there's plenty of videos out there about how to talk to sellers, meet sellers, but what happens once the seller says yes? What do you do next? And we're going to talk to you guys about that now. Okay, so the seller said yes to you, and you want to be able to wholesale this deal and make it your first assignment check. So Jay, what do you first do to move this transaction along to actually make this happen for you?
Yeah, so the first step, and this may seem obvious to a lot of you, but I know a lot of wholesalers, a lot of investors who actually don't think about this step, but the very first thing you want to do is you want to get it in writing. You want to get a contract with that seller. Because remember, until you have it in writing, until the seller signs something and you've signed something that says you're moving forward under certain terms and conditions, the seller can always back out. They can always find another investor to sell to, or they can decide not to sell. So the very first thing is to get it under contract. Now, where do you find those contracts? There are plenty of contracts out there. Talk to a local real estate attorney. Talk to your local, some local investors in your local real estate investor association meetup groups. Talk to a local real estate agent, get a state-specific contract. Lots of contracts out there, but find one that works for you and get all your terms and agreements down on paper. Get the seller to sign them. Then once you have a signed contract, you're going to want to get that contract over to either your title company or your closing attorney. Depending on what state you live in, closings may take place through what's called a title company. Other states, closings have to take place through an attorney. So figure out the laws in your state, get the contract to your title company or your closing attorney, and then they're going to start the process. They're going to do something called pulling title, opening escrow, which is the process of getting the whole thing started in the legal fashion.
And that's the best way to do it because you can't do it any other way. So once you have that done, now you can actually go out there and start marketing your property to other investors. You can start sourcing it. Now remember, your goal is you're not selling so much of the property, you're selling a contract to investors. That's the really key here. That's why you're not a real estate agent when you're doing this. But you're going to be marketing this contract to other investors. So how do you do that? Most of you guys will hopefully have a buyer's list. There's other videos out there. We can do another video later about how to create a buyer's list for investors. I buy a lot of deals from wholesalers. Jay's bought a lot of deals from wholesalers. We're your ideal buyers, right? So now when you bring the contract to us or you market it to us in some capacity, you got to give us some information. How many bedrooms and baths are the house? What do you think the repairs need to be done to the house to be able to get it to a certain value? What the ARV is, after repair value. These are all marketable content that you need to be able to put out there to us so it helps us make a decision better and faster on the project so that we can buy it from you or buy the contract from you. So if you're able to tell us, hey, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, it's 1,200 square feet. We think you need about $50,000 of repairs, roughly, maybe 60. And if you do that, you can sell it for X amount. Here's some photos, here's some information to it, and here's whatever other information you have on it to make it get to a certain value. I can then take that info, or your buyer can take that info and be able to make better decisions on it, ask you some questions. Now, I might want to go inspect the property, or your buyer might want to go inspect the property. Well, in that case, you got to work with the seller to be able to find a way to get inside the house so you can bring your contractor or bring your investor or bring other people to the project to be able to go see it so we can inspect it, because not all investors are going to buy it sight unseen. Once you've gone through that, you might have gone through that a few times with some different investors, you're now going to go to the next step because one of those investors hopefully commits to buying the contract from you from some sort of assignment fee. And what would you have to do once somebody says yes?
Yeah, so we get to the point in the process where we now have an agreement with the seller and now we have an agreement with an investor who's going to buy that contract. It's now important to do, just like you did with the seller, you have to get it in writing. You have to create a contract. The contract that we use to assign an agreement, a seller's agreement, over to another investor is actually called an assignment contract. And this is the contract that you use that basically says, I'm no longer in contract with the seller. You are now in contract with the seller. So lots of places you can get this assignment contract, just like there were a lot of places to get the original contract. You can talk to a local real estate attorney who can write up an assignment contract for you. Another great way to do it is to go find a local wholesaler, specifically somebody in your market, because remember, a lot of contracts are state specific. Find a local wholesaler, ask him if you can use his assignment contract, and that's the writing, that's the contract that you use to assign the contract that you have with the seller over to your new buyer, over to your investor buyer. You get it in writing.
And that, on that point, even talking to other wholesalers, some of my first wholesale deals I ever did, I did with other wholesalers, and we did it together, and that's how I was able to get contracts. I might have had a partner with that wholesaler. It's called a joint assignment, basically. where maybe I'm like, okay, I have a property to assign. I don't really know what to do. There's nothing wrong with going to another wholesaler that has a buyer's list, knows what they're doing, knows how to package it up, and basically split the assignment with them in some way. And in return, you get the deal closed if you didn't know what you're doing with it. But two, you also kind of get their information, you get their contracts a bit, right? And most wholesalers that I know of that'll do some sort of joint assignment are totally free given of the assignment contract, even if, specifically, even if you're doing it with them. Yep. So that's another way to do it too. So don't shy away from doing business with other people, because think long-term that there's more deals coming, not just that one.
Exactly.
Right? So, all right, so you signed it. Now what's the next thing you gotta do?
So you have the assignment contract. The next thing you have to do is you have to collect what's called earnest money. So typically speaking, the assignment contract is very simple. It's typically one page, and it basically says, this contract that belonged to me now belongs to you, and you're buying this contract from me for some amount of money. Maybe you're assigning that contract for $2,000 or $5,000 or $10,000. That's your profit on the deal. Now, you want to lock that buyer in. You don't want to give the buyer an incentive to change his mind in a day or a week or in a month leading up to the closing. So you want that buyer to put down what's called earnest money. This is a deposit, a non-refundable deposit that the buyer puts down. And if the buyer decides to walk, not close on the property, you now collect this money. So this is the fee that the buyer pays to prove that he's serious. It's called earnest money. Typically, the buyer is going to write a check to the same title company or closing attorney that we talked about earlier, that's opening escrow, that's pulling title, that's handling the closing. They're going to write a check, your earnest money check. They're going to give it to that closing attorney or to that title company, and that's going to lock in the contract, the assignment contract that you've signed.
Yeah, and that's standard. You usually are going to negotiate that with the buyer in some form. You're going to a few $1,000s. If it's a big property, it's going to be a little bit more than that, and so forth. But it's normal. Most buyers are totally used to that, and if they're not used to that, then you might question yourself: is this somebody I should be selling the property to? Because they might not be a good buyer. Because that goes to the final point, which is that you have to get to the closing table. Right? Even though you've done all this work, you've got the contract with the buyer, you found somebody to buy the property, you've assigned it, you've opened escrow, the deal's not done until it's done, until it's fully done. When you've received your assignment fee, that means the entire transaction is finished. You need to be communicating with the seller, making sure that they understand, hey, we're still going to be closing on this date. If you had any inspection contingencies with the seller, you got to communicate with them what's going on with those, whether you're waiving them or whether you're keeping them. Make sure that they're thinking what their next steps of life are going to be like once they sell this property. Maybe they need to sell it because they have some sort of financial distress. Maybe they need to sell it because they just don't want to be there anymore. But talk to them a lot about what's going to happen once it closes, because the seller still needs to come to the closing table. At the same time, your buyer needs to come to the closing table. So if you have a buyer that maybe has never bought a property, it's really important that you're making sure that buyer has the funding that they need, that they're going to be able to close on time, because you're the one that still has that contract with the seller, and you're the one responsible ultimately with what happens on that contract if you don't close. So make sure you find good buyers, make sure that you know that they are coming to the closing table. Just because two people sign a contract doesn't mean it actually happens. So work with the title company. Are there title issues? Are there things that are coming up on title that you need to help clear up with the seller so they can sell the property? These are all things that might happen in a transaction that you should still be actively involved in to make sure it still closes. That is so important, and it's fully done. So other than that, any other last tips on that?
Yeah, I think you covered everything there, but I'm going to reiterate your last point, which is this is your deal. You need to maintain control. If something goes wrong, it's your fault. So you need to make sure that you're in constant communication with the seller, that you're in constant communication with your investor buyer, that you're in constant communication with the title company or the attorney, and that you're coordinating everything. Because again, this is your deal, and until you actually collect that check, the deal's not done.
Yep. And so you can look for your little name on the settlement statement and jump for joy when you get that check and cash your first check as an assignment fee. And hopefully it's a lot of money for you. So that said, hope you guys like these videos. If you guys have any comments or likes or subscribes or anything like that you want to do with our BiggerPockets videos, definitely do that below. We'll do our best to go back there and answer some questions as we go forward. You can follow me on Instagram, Tarl Yarber, or my company Fixated RE on Instagram or Facebook. You can also follow J Scott.
J Scott _123flip on Instagram, or check me out on my website, jscott.com.
We'll see you guys in future videos.